We saw in the previous lesson that Sina4D did all the espresso for us, but most of the time you will use your own manually added espresso system, and you add it by simply going to Sina4D tags, and the last guy here is the espresso tag. If there were some question marks left about espresso, I will explain you how espresso is simple to understand. At least the way it operates. I created a free random node. If you hold down the control key, you can actually copy the selected node, and we will do this also in this lesson. Just for the sake of clarification, these blue guys are the input guys. You input some sort of information, process it through a node, and you output it through this red guy, and proceed it possibly to another node. This way you will create simple or even complex relations and automatizations or setups inside Sina4D. So every single node has the input side and the output side. I hope this is clear enough so we can continue. We select all of them and delete them. And also this espresso tag. Firstly, I want to show you what I want to achieve. And this doodle guy is pretty much perfect for it. Well, let's say that I want to have a slider here in the viewport. That it goes from 0 to -100 and also to 100. And let's say that I want this sphere to have some sort of a material which is black here. And when I slide the slider all the way through this 100 value, I want that material to become red. And when it hits -100 to become blue. Doesn't matter, I just took colors for representation, so this is black, just for the sake of clarity. Well, we can also achieve that with keyframes and with some animation inside the material, but it is always the best way to have it automated, so it's versatile, flexible, and reusable. Let me clear that doodle frame, and we will start by building our espresso system. I can delete this guy also, and we'll add the espresso tag to this sphere and create this simple setup. I almost always dock these guys, something like this. It's just a personal workflow preference, nothing else. You can dock it, you don't have to dock it, do whatever. Like, you can even dock it anywhere you want. Naturally, I will need a material, so I'll create a new one and rename it, let's say, Colorshifter. So let's try and translate our idea into espresso logic. So we'll naturally have to have a sphere here, and we will have to have a material, because we have to establish some sort of a relationship between them. We have to tell through this sphere that we want to shift the color of the material. So do what you obviously have to do. I think I got extra H here, so let me just quickly fix that so we are clear. And you can see Espresso automatically updates names of the objects. And we also need a slider here, and this is a bit tricky, so I want you to follow really closely now, especially if this is the first time you're dealing with user data. To create user data, you have to select your object, and here under user data, go add user data. A new window will pop up, and obviously the first thing you want to do, you want to be consistent. You want to name this Colorshifter, because you want to and you will be shifting colors with this. And this can be a little bit intimidating, as there are so many options here, but this shouldn't concern you at all. User data is simply a custom control, a data that is otherwise not provided inside Sina4D. You will create your own tool, your own custom setup. In this specific case, what I want is a slider here. I already know that this is a float slider. And if you're not sure how does any of this geeky stuff really looks like, you can simply see here by example. This is the float slider. Here you can set up some different properties for it. So this one is pretty self-explanatory, it's animatable. The step, so you can see it goes by 1. You can set any other step you want, but I suggest leaving it 1. This will mean from which is the lowest value and which is the maximum value. Naturally, you want to use 0 to 100. It's really the most logical thing to do. And that's it. I also suggest taking a look about the various data types and interfaces inside Cine4D, and we will build some different things throughout this training, but we will go slowly. So click OK now. And you can instantly see here under user data that we have a custom slider, exactly the one we created. So it's from 0 to 100. It doesn't do anything yet. Since I really like my controls to be accessible really fast, I want to put this in the viewport. And you will notice when I deselect the object, I don't have that control. I want to have it all the time in the viewport. So I will simply right click on this control. And you can do that on any other thing in Cine4D and do a add to HUD command. I will hold down my control key, so it's not directly over sphere. Let's say somewhere like here. The other thing is, if I deselect my sphere now, this slider will disappear. I'll have to force the visibility to always. So I will right click on the slider and say show always. So regardless if this object is selected or not, that slider will be in the viewport. So now we already have some conditions met. We have our control here. We have the object that will output some sort of information and drive the color information on this material. So let's build that simple system. So here on the output of this sphere, go all the way down and you will see that user data we created. So select that Colorshifter. This guy and this guy inside the node are completely the same thing, but we will say that this Colorshifter command, this slider will drive color here. So we will select color for the output. So in this case, it will be only red color. So color, red. And before we connect these two guys, I will set my material to a completely black color, just to avoid some pollution with white colors and white values. So completely black. Let's connect those two guys and see what do we have. And let's try out our slider. As you can see, it works. 0 is completely not red, means the default value, and as we slowly progress to 100, it will gain in red until at 100 it's completely red. And that would be it if we didn't want to add a blue color in this setup. So if you remember, we wanted also to have a slider from 0 to minus 100. So let's break this connection. I will double click on this guy just to remove it temporarily, because I will edit user data. I will manage that user data. So once again, I will select my Colorshifter, but here in the minimum value, since I want the minus 100 to be all the way to the left, I will say here minus 100. And you can see in the example already. So I have a 0 to 100 and also to the opposite side to minus 100. So, okay. And you can see that this value has not updated. You can try two things. First one is to right click and say refresh. And If that doesn't work, in this case it works, simply remove it and add it once again. Let's put that value to default, so right click, reset to default, and the default value is 0. Once again, we can add that same user data, but just to be sure, we edit it once again, so we avoid any potential problems if this hasn't updated. So now I have to rethink about this setup a bit. Because simply, if I add blue color here and drive both of those values with the same color shifter, look what happens. I will get something completely different. And just to show you what is happening, I will open this material editor. We'll also dock it somewhere here so we can clearly see what is going on. You can see how Synapse is powerful regarding layout and easing up your workflow. I wanted to show you that these both values, look, if I move my slider, they both change. And I really have to rethink this because I want to have red only here and blue on the other side. So this simply won't work. I have to have something in between to tell each of these outputs to behave on its own. So I'll break these connections. And I will once again here on my material, I will drop it back to complete black, just to avoid any potential problems. Also, this controller has to go to default value of 0. Be aware of that. That is very important while you're ringing. Don't miss steps. It's really easy to lose control over everything. Once again, for this setup, we will use range mapper. So, new node, Espresso, calculate range mapper. With range mapper, we can define and limit those inputs and outputs. So let's create a first connection, and I know this input lower upper and output lower upper can be a little bit confusing, so let's clarify that once for all. So this input lower and input upper are the range of your control, and the output lower and the upper is the range of your result, in this case the color value. So let's doodle it. So this is 0 and this is 100%. We will force the values just to make things clearer. So we will select here input range percent and also as output range percent. So this input lower should be 0, this input upper should be 100. And this output is considering our red color. So output lower should be 0 and the red is completely red, is 100% red. So leave this also at 100 and let's connect those two guys and see is it okay. So something like this, and it works. So let's reset that guy to default. Just clear my doodle frame. We have to do the same thing for this blue guy, but just from 0 to -100. Since we cannot use this same range mapper, we will use another. Because if we will use the same, we will use the same values and we will again get that pink result, which we don't want. So I will just copy this guy. I will hold down my control key and drag it a bit and I will create a copy. So once again, this color shifter will be our control. Accidentally switched off this first guy. And in this case, the input lower is also 0, but the input upper is not 100. It should be -100. So let's put a minus here. And let's connect this to output port and see what we have. I will just change my display to garage shading. so it's much more clear. So you can see we have simple color setup. What is good about it? It is flexible, it is reusable, and it is versatile. Espresso is great, powerful, it can produce fantastic results, magnificent setups, it is animatable completely, and we will do some more espresso setups in future lessons. I want to talk a little bit about reset switches and a tiny bit about simple scripting inside Cinema 14.